Hello.
Hello.
Hey.
Hello, James. Hi. I'm not sure if I can hear you right.
Can you hear me okay?
Yeah. Yeah.
Hey.
So, yeah.
Good. Well, Inês, it's great to have you here and welcome to In Conversation. How's things going?
Thank you. Thanks for having me. We finally made it.
We've been going back and forth for a while. I'm really glad that you've been able to join us today. We've got a few people who are now joining us on this Instagram, and I'm sure a few more people will as we continue the conversation. So it's just going to be a formal chat. We're going to talk a bit about your art, your practice, your research, and of course the Journal of Arts Writing by students, and anything else you want to talk about, really. For anyone who's joining the audience, please do drop your questions in the comments, and Inês and I will try and get around to them as things progress. But to kick things off, where are you calling in from today?
I'm calling in from Peniche in Portugal. This is where I've moved after 15 years in the UK. It was a very tough decision to leave the UK. Unfortunately, Brexit helped ushering that decision, and some other personal circumstances, such as having inherited a piece of land and a house as well. So that kind of started creating lots of ideas of things that I could do, not based in the UK, where I was starting to struggle financially, mainly, really, because career-wise it was actually going okay. So then, yeah, I settled for now. Now I settled here. I intend to launch a 10-year program, so a cultural programming in this area, in this region. And that's where I am at the moment. It's a seaside town, rural area. One of the reasons why I left the London, which I miss dearly, was to get away from the rat race. Really, it was starting taking its toll. Really, so I basically that was also another reason why I came back to Portugal, because I'm Portuguese.
Oh, that's interesting. So you're going through a bit of a transition at the moment, then, it sounds like. You spent 15 years in the UK. Was it all in London?
No. So I started off in Maidstone in Kent. That's where I did my HND in graphic design. Then I did my BA in illustration. And then I went to Surrey, and I worked as a arts management. I was running classical musicians' diaries, so contracting musicians to orchestras and to soundtrack recordings and things like that for movies, for films. And so that's where, I mean, I always had this idea of, I always saw myself managing, but it was quite lucky that I got straight into it after college, and especially in an area of knowledge that I've been trained as a musician, so it was quite an interesting way in through arts as a parallel activity that I had before, but then in the end served its purpose in the actual art world as well in the end. Yeah.
Okay, that sounds pretty cool. So. Sorry, go on.
Sorry. So yeah. So I spent another few years there, 2-3 years there, and then I went to London. I took a few months out in the transition between Surrey and London. Came to Portugal just for a bit of a cleanse, but then I returned to the UK in London, basically. Yeah.
Very cool. So yeah, you said you missed a few things about London. What is it that you missed? Because also said rat race, and I can completely appreciate that there. But I guess it is wonderful when it comes to art and music, and there's a lot of culture going on there. So is that the kind of?
Definitely, most definitely, and especially living in a rural area. I mean, Portugal in itself. I mean, Lisbon has an art buzz for sure. Yeah, even though it's a totally different art buzz from London. The whole idea of art and exhibitions, it's I wouldn't say, how can I put this, Lisbon has a very traditional art scene, commercial galleries. Now you start seeing, in the last 2 years, you start seeing independent spaces coming up. So residency spaces, practice research spaces, artist-run spaces, which before and up until now were mainly and strongly just commercial galleries, the usual interactions, set in the sort of elitist and bourgeoisie type of environment. It's still a very common word here, bourgeoisie. People really, people still talk a lot about that here, and that was surprising, to be honest.
Why do you think that is, in terms of that sort of Marxist sort of definition, or is it because of Portugal's political past or cultural past, or what do you think the use of that term indicates?
I think it's to do, yes, as in answering to the political side of things as well. But I think it's to do with the tradition of art making, like art for art's sake. And I think it's still the idea of practice-based research in the academic, in the artistic field is still very new, is still not ingrained in the university or academia life, and then that doesn't get passed down to the artists coming out of university, basically. I think it's just old traditions that still haven't been deconstructed, and unfortunately there's a lot of patriarchy here as well, very strong and alive. So these kind of things also help this status quo is still being quite strong in the art world here, I feel. But in terms of the bourgeoisie term, I think it's again to do with the traditions of art making itself. There's still a lot of reference to how it's a middle class type of activity in which you have the sponsors and all of this culture of collectors and a very sort of hermetic chosen. I think the genius, the genius spirit is still alive here, whereas the traditions that are a bit more practice-based research that definition is a bit more diluted and it's not so strong.
Interesting. And you mentioned that things are changing, and it sounds like, and you said the past 2 years. Does that directly relate to COVID and to the broader changes in the world, or is this just happening independently? And do you think that, you talk about patriarchy and about this more sort of it being more of a traditional middle class, your modern day Medici's kind of like holding up the art world there. Is it just, deconstructing that, and is it just that time has come, or do you feel that maybe the pandemic and other changes to the zeitgeist globally are impacting the art world and just kind of art practice in Portugal right now?
I can't be sure, to be honest, because in my personal experience, COVID hasn't affected my daily life all that much, because I live in a rural area, and living in a rural area is really totally different from living in an urban area when it comes to the pandemic. So I actually don't have a practical or experiential notion of how that has affected. I feel from people that I've been speaking with and from when I returned to Portugal as well, I was already starting to feel that buzz, that will, that like recognition and acknowledgement that Portugal was still a little stuck in these sort of traditional ways of going about art making. I think it's parallel. I'm not sure. Again, I'm not the best person to ask about COVID's impact in an urban area, which is where the art world exists in Portugal. It's in rural areas. There's maybe no, in the interior of the country, in inland, there is more art and culture. There's much more residencies happening, much more emphasis on, for example, municipalities sponsoring artists and art making, because they don't have as much tourism. And by the seacoast, by the seaside where I live, there's a lot of emphasis on tourism. So that means that the art and culture gets a bit diluted as well, and it's not, unfortunately. But I'm here to find that.
Well, that leads nicely to. You obviously moved to Portugal. I'm going to ask you a little bit more about your own art, your own research, and your own practice. But this is quite fascinating to begin with. So you just remind me again the town you've moved to, because I don't recall ever hearing of it before.
Yeah, it's called Peniche. It's Peniche. Yeah, it's very close to where I'm actually originally from, right. And that was just a strategic move in terms of being able to have resources around me. It's not that I particularly feel rooted to this place or anything like that. It was literally a practical decision. Right. It's a beautiful place, don't get me wrong. Otherwise I wouldn't be here anyway. We have seaside, we have mountains. I mean, we have it all, really.
That sounds wonderful. Not to give
yes.
But and then again, I was just wondering, I was going to try and see if I can make it a little bit lighter in here, because I feel like I'm a little bit dark. Hopefully, I'm just going to backlight me. Maybe that'll help a little bit. Sorry, pardon me. So, what are your grand plans then? Because it sounds like you've got yourself a manifesto in place, and that you're ready to make some waves in the local art scene, or to change the culture a little bit. So, yeah, just tell us a little bit about what your plans are.
Yeah, so I basically identified exactly that gap, that there's not a lot of contemporary art talk around here. So, and I am passionate about contemporary art and emerging artists. This is where I worked mostly in the last few years of London. Yeah, and then with draws as well, actually, working with emerging artists and authors. And so basically I identified that there's nothing happening here in those terms. So because of my research and because of how I got enthralled in environmental issues and ecology, geopolitics, and all these topical themes that are basically our climate emergency and surrounding contiguous issues. So, you know, it's just a matter of putting the two and two together, you know. I've got a piece of land, I've got a house, which I need to live in as well, of course, but from then we can then start bigger plans, and the idea is to create an arts residency, which we are in the process of creating. There's been so many roller coasters you wouldn't imagine, but fortunately I've gained some I've acquired some knowledge from some bursaries that I've had from University College of London in Green Tech Enterprise. I've also done some courses in social innovation and entrepreneurship, so I to be able to understand how to tackle communities, because in the end of the day, when you're talking about ecological issues, you need to be able to know how to approach these and to be sensitive to the communities in which you are going to jump into. These are matters that affect people's habits. It affects people's conceptions of the world, their own position in the whole planet themselves. So you're talking about very intimate and even private matters. It's not just, the planet is burning down. No, it's what can you do, what can you change in your life to for your own survival. I mean, the planet is going to survive. So it's very, very delicate. It's a very delicate issue. And especially in rural areas. I mean, rural areas tend to have a low standard of education. A majority of people here have only the 4th grade, which is primary school, which is incredibly low. Some people don't know how to read still.
Wow, that's quite a major, sort of serious sociological difference, I suppose, say between there and maybe like London, where you're coming from. I
mean, I'm not talking about the younger generations. Younger generations have I'd say 6th year to 9th year of school, it's the average. But it's a much lower rate of university students, incredibly lower. Even secondary school is much lower. So again, I had a tutor once who, I will never forget her words, because I taught English as a second language as well. And she taught me, anything you write, anything you say, anything you communicate has to be clear for the professor, for the layman, and for the donkey. So this really stayed with me. So having this capacity of being able to articulate really complex issues in a simple language that still doesn't affect the coherence and the consistency of what you're actually trying to transmit is essential. It's hard. It's very hard.
A unique skill, and of course, as publishers of academic research, there's something that we're always trying to foster. And again, like, I think there's a certain amount of elitism through language that you see within academic publishing, and what we try to put across is that, you know, you really don't need to communicate using verbose terminology or you know, complicated language that no one can really understand. And I feel it is still kind of preconception of people when they're submitting, say, a journal proposal or an abstract, that it can be extraordinarily convoluted, and I haven't got a clue what people are talking about, and I read these things every day. Even an expert on the area, I surely should be able to understand it. So it's definitely some of the advice that we give and something that we're trying to break down. So for example, what we're doing at the moment, which might be of interest to you, we're taking some of our important journal articles and we're asking the journal, you know, the journal contributor, the writer of the article, to break it down and to take out the core of the argument and to rewrite it in a way that definitely is communicable and understandable to a very wide range of different people, you know, different academic backgrounds and different levels of literacy. And it's really challenging, you know, and it's challenging for the author, it's challenging for us, and but it's really a task. So it's nice. Yeah, we're not the only ones thinking about it.
Yeah.
And to jump around a little bit, I wanted to ask you, you kind of define yourself as both an artist and a researcher. Which one came first? Was it the academia or was it the art practice?
Ooh, very interesting question. I actually don't know. I was never asked that question. I never thought it. Never thought about it. Thanks.
Well, perhaps they're more symbiotic. That's another.
Yeah, because you know, I always loved studying. Since a very young age, I learned how to read way before primary school, and with my mum at home. She wasn't a teacher or anything. She just taught me as she went. But I'd say the artist feeling came more evidently earlier, because as far as I was concerned, studying and research and investigation was just always there. I kind of felt like it was always going to be present in a way. So much so that when I worked as a fabricator, I worked for Rakeem Shaw.
Oh, yeah.
As a fabricator for 3.5 years, and it was exactly that. It was the studying part that I was missing. I mean, I was drawing and painting every day, more than 10 hours a day sometimes. It was wonderful, you know, but then there was something missing, and it was that, diving yourself into reading and to understanding what's going on in the world from many other perspectives of life as well, of course. Yeah, I'd say they kind of walked side by side, but I knew from the beginning that I was going to be an artist very early in the day. Yeah, that's
it's always interesting because quite a lot of people maybe begin as artists and then later in life they maybe become educators or researchers, some because of their failed art career, others because they've had enough of it, because they want to pass on the information and their own experiences. But not often necessarily do you find someone who's an artist and a researcher and how it kind of they goes hand in hand, because there is this friction, isn't there? I think, as well, say the academic world and the art world. But you don't find that to be problematic? Do you find that to be it helps you in both ways, or do you encounter any resistance and friction?
I think that in academia at the moment, that friction is dissipating more and more. This is the feeling I get. I think practice-based research has been, especially in Nordic countries and Anglo-Saxon traditions, have been implemented for much longer time than in Latin-based countries. So, and it's kind of expanding. It's coming, trickling down slowly but surely. And I think practice-based research, which is, I mean, I studied in the UK, so it's something that I've always been, there's always been input into in the way I was looking at art. I think more and more that friction is disappearing. Not to say that it doesn't still exist, and this is to do mainly with perhaps still a tendency to, and coming back a little bit to what I was saying about the art world in Portugal, which is this hermetic and elitistic way of seeing art. Art for art's sake has a totally different way of seeing art than transdisciplinary practices. And I think the more transdisciplinary practices become, the less friction with academia there will be. In the end of the day, practice-based research was born out of the necessity to be funded, and the way to for art practice to be funded, and the way they found around that, it was for research grants to be channeled through university channels into art. So it's a recent process. We started in the late 80s, so it's like we're 30 years into it tops. So it's fine. I think it's progressing. I think it's kind of going into some sort of a momentum now, in which people are recognizing more and more. I mean, PhDs have skyrocketed in the last few years in terms of the amount of people doing them in the arts, because only recently they also become so widely available. So, and why did they become widely available? Because this friction is starting to dissipate, or instead of dissipating, is actually they're taking advantage of this friction and creating a space within this friction, which is even more interesting as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah, well put. Well, let's talk a little bit about your own practice then. So, you obviously, we've said you do yourself as an artist, part researcher. So tell us a bit about your own art, and how would you describe it? What kind of mediums? What interests?
Yeah. So yeah, I'm most definitely practice-based research, and most definitely transdisciplinary. This is what I really believe in, and this came also from a little bit from John Latham's tradition. He was in a way the founder of art residencies, and not going too much into his theories and that, but he believed that artists have the right to create knowledge around by experiencing in areas of knowledge that they don't have knowledge in. So the knowledge of art can how can I say, can infiltrate, so to speak, the other knowledges to then create other knowledges. And yeah, I think that's where I see myself is in this transdisciplinary field. Obviously, again, coming back to the idea of transdisciplinarity and academia and how this all came about, is because of natural sciences and social sciences and the world of academia, which is something I also like to explore. So my practice tends to get based on geology, and then I tend to use that to provoke social and political commentary. But at the moment, I'm kind of starting to acknowledge myself as an artist within the making of art. So phenomenology and sensorial intricacies, more personal exercises. I was, up until now, I was doing quite, in the early stages, I was doing a lot of activism-based artwork, using my own blood, using episodes of running from the police and things like that. Very, very much fun, a bit adrenaline, a bit of a boost of adrenaline, fun at the same time. Yeah, it was very interesting. This was in particular two particular situations. One of which was I was trying to shoot the chimney out of a petrol plant in northern England, and the security detail came after me, and they were tailing me so much that I kind of felt so much pressure that I stopped. They came out of the car and they said, "You can't be shooting this." And I asked, "Why not?" "No, you can't be shooting this. You get out. And then the police contacted me, and I had to file a report that I was not a terrorist. So I was on, I think it was Blackpool's, no, Hull. I was in Hull's domestic terrorism blacklist for 2 years. You know, when you get a light fine, it was the same idea, but it was a specific list for domestic terrorism. Just because I was taking pictures to the pipelines, taking pictures, I was just trying to film the chimney. So I started understanding the real pressures of the fossil fuel industry quite early in the day. And that was really exciting to have this. And my practice is a lot like that. It's very local bound. It's territory bound. So if there's a topic that interests me, I go to this place. I do field research. I feel the place with my body, with my intellect, and from then I then work with what I got, with perhaps some material. In this case, I like to collect stones. I'm a rockaholic, so yeah. So it always comes from a place of field research and a feeling of place. I mean, in the end of the day, I'm talking about geology, and geology is all about the earth and the place of earth. So it only makes sense for me to work like that. And then I go to the studio, or I read, or then there's a stage of more theoretical or more reflection in journals, writing. Writing is a lot of also my practice, as you would guess, I suppose. But yeah, and then after that, I start working on actual artworks. And this can be drawing, can be video, can be sculpture, can be newspapers, print, books. My master's was, the first 120 credits was on book arts. Okay. And then I did another extra 60 credits because my tutor at the time said it was important, and I totally agree with her. But it was a lot of work to do 2 masters at the same time for 3 months. And then I did the final 60 credits for the qualification, the MFA. And that was fine art, basically. And that's more or less it in terms of art practice. The medium is the message, isn't it? So in the end, that's how I kind of go about choosing what medium I will be employing.
It sounds like an ecocentric approach is very important to you. So with that in mind, I did want to ask you about, excuse my pronunciation, materia cyclica, is it? Is that something?
Yeah,
there we go.
Very good. It's materia cyclica, yeah.
So tell us a bit about this project and what that means to you and why it's important, and talk a little bit more about your sort of ecocentric focus in regards to that. That would be cool.
Yeah, so kind of reeling from the conversation we were having earlier about how to communicate all of these big issues in sizable bites that people can actually take in and start implementing in their daily lives. Yeah, I mean, it came from the masters, basically, and this is another reason why I went into fine art after the book arts, because during my research stage in book arts, I always knew I was going to doing something to do with books. I mean, I did illustration, graphic design, editorial design. I went to the publishing training house in London and did editorial management. So books have always been, books writing and editing has always been present in my progression, professional pathway. So I just thought that I needed to break free from the book form, and that's why I went into the MFA. All of this research about ecology and the need for action came from the masters, and so I started the masters in 2015. In 2016, I was already submitting to JAWS, and it actually one of the articles I published with JAWS really helped me articulating exactly what I was, what my practice was doing. To my actual life, you know. So again, I've inherited the house. Brexit happened, and lots of other personal things kind of converged into coming to Portugal to create this arts organization. I mean, I've managed studios for Arbeit Gallery in London. They have artist studios. I was running their South London studios, and so their Hackney Wick studios. So I was getting a lot of experience in. I had already started in arts management with the musicians, and then other professional experiences led me onto this. But it was really quite strong, this sense of artistic community, day to day, managing the whole building and artists' needs. And so we thought it was, we needed to do an ecocentric art residency here in Portugal. What distinguishes us from other residencies, perhaps, is that we're not asking artists to exhibit, but we are asking artists to document their art practice and then publish their art practice. So yeah, I couldn't let go of publishing, sorry.
I think that's very common now. You're getting artists who, you know, are reflecting on their own practice and then publishing their own outputs and their own research on their own work and on their own concepts. And I think that's kind of definitely a big change. It used to be the academy talking about the canonized artist, whereas now it's artists reflecting upon their own practice and on their own processes, which is interesting.
I think, you know, the more I speak with, I talk with curators. Not all of them say this, of course, but at all. But I think the curator, it's not becoming obsolete in itself at all, but it's changing. The function of a curator is changing, whereas before the curator had to figure out how to lay out the exhibition, how to do the historical contextualization, and local as well, of course, in the art world that they would fit in. I think now things are changing a bit more, and artists are a bit more autonomous and a bit more decisive as to how they want to show their work, and how this happened, how even the whole theoretical backdrop of this happens in their contextualization. But just to finish off on materia cyclica, at the moment we're actually, I mean, Portugal, I've been struggling with the bureaucratic nature of this country. So it's been quite hard so far to find places, and the municipalities are difficult to deal with. So like I said, all the funding is going into tourism and intensive agriculture, which is something that we're trying to fight as well. So, you know, it's really hard to get people's real attention into funding or helping an arts organization around here. So we're struggling a little bit with getting a headquarters in terms of public interface, but we are at the moment we're working with partnerships. So we're exhibiting in other places that are not our own. But the ecology part is going pretty well. We have an initiative which is we collect compost door to door. So this compost then is, well, is kitchen scraps that then turns into compost. The community can adopt a tree in our land. The compost that they collect feeds that tree that they've adopted. So it kind of creates somehow a closed circle within actually the ecology that we are creating. And the idea is that in this garden and land that we're reforesting and regenerating the soil, is to create a land art place for artists to go and experiment within the landscape, have a stage. Things are progressing a lot on this front. And we apply principles of permaculture, so kind of education through other partnerships with schools and things like that. So it has these two sides of it. It has a more activist and pedagogical side to it, in which I don't want to be spoon feeding everybody on these things. So it's kind of I wouldn't say relaxed, but low key as far as we're not kind of pushing people to do things. We provide strategies, we provide platforms, we provide tools for people to engage with us. If they engage with us, then that becomes a whole ecology in itself. And the idea is to include artists as one of the main catalysts for reflection. So we do all of this parts of ecology, which is quite ingrained in activism, but then we reflect through contemporary art and through the work that artists will do in the land, local based and relevant to the region that we are in.
And Inês, if people want to find out more about Materia Cyclica or your own practice, is your website perhaps the best place for them to go and find out more?
Yeah, on my website they will find links for JAWS, for Materia Cyclica, but they can also visit Materia Cyclica's website, of course, as well.
What's the URL, or what should people search if they want to find the website?
So my own website is www.inesartista.net. So it's artist with an A at the end. And Materia Cyclicas is cyclicmatter.org. Great.
And before we get into JAWS, which we will momentarily, I just wanted to ask you a few more questions about art. So first of all, right now, is there any particular artists, either in Portugal or globally, that you're finding particularly interesting, that you'd like to highlight their work? Maybe a couple that you find particularly, who are doing interesting work in light of what's going on?
A very interesting question, because I've been flooded with new names recently that I haven't had the chance to check them out properly. I was told the names and then I just had a brief scan. And at the moment here in Portugal, there is actually an artist that I'm keeping my eye out. She's called Jessica Burrinha, and she's the sculptress, very young, coming out of university, but you know, that's kind of my area of focus anyway. And she's already getting some clout, but she works a lot with stratigraphy and with the actual earth. And I really loved one of her last pieces. It was quite powerful. But in terms of international artists, I mean, I'm kind of running on a blank here because there's so many interesting artists. But I'd say Amar Kanwar is one of my favorite artists ever. He's done a major work, which is a library of seeds in India, and it's basically a whole process. This was in 2008, maybe 2009, 10. It's an ongoing project. But basically, he was doing a lot of work with Indian farmers, and it was at that stage in which Indian farmers were committing a lot of suicide. Excuse me. And he did a whole poetic installation of it. So with a video projection on a book, at the archive of the rice seeds, because they were. The seeds are being monopolized, so indigenous species there's less and less variety of these species.
Interesting.
And his work was beautiful. It was very complete, thorough, and poetic as well. But now I came to the name John Aconfra. It's definitely my on my top two.
Well, following on from that, I wanted to ask who were some of the big influences on you artistically when you were growing up, either for your own practice or just that really inspired you and, you know, to be interested in art, generally speaking.
Growing up, it was hard because I wasn't really in touch with a lot of the contemporary art world. It was more modern artists, and having started from an illustration sort of frame of mind and not so much into fine art, I definitely Salvador Dali, Marx Ernst, and you know the surrealists were always kind of in my horizon. But as I started going into book arts, my tutor, Susan Johanknecht, I love her work. I was blessed and honored to be her student. The course actually doesn't exist anymore, so I'm one of a rare breed of students that was her student. So it's beautiful. Her work's beautiful. Yeah, more recently, Mona Hatoun, in terms of powerful installations, John Aconfra, David Cross, he's an academic, John Latham as well, because of the whole, the process I more or less explained before. So these are all multidisciplinary artists who, and they don't necessarily touch on just the themes I work with. I mean, art is so vast that in a funny way, Rakib also influenced me in, I mean, working 3.5 years for an artist, it has to make an impression on you.
Yeah.
I would say that he made an impression on me technically, that's for sure. But also, he used to say something very, quite a cool thing, a pun. He used to say a pun. Designers say less is more, and he would always say more is more.
Yeah. But I can see that, yeah. Yeah.
So I guess that in terms of drawing, I understood that, and I use a little bit of that to my own editing, in my own way. But yeah, there's so many good artists out there. It's very hard to pinpoint.
Well, what about any particular periods in art history that you are particularly drawn to? You've mentioned surrealism. Is there anything else that, you know, I'm a big fan of surrealism, I think, and I found surrealism actually through the work of Buñuel. So I came into it more from a movie and from a filmmaking perspective. Then obviously his work with Dali, and you know, then finding the Breton and the traditions of surrealism, but through kind of Lucien Andalou and the work of Buñuel and sort of his essays and things as well. But are there any other particular movements that you find particularly inspiring or particularly interesting that you return to?
Yeah, I always go back to the Situationists, Guy Debord, and the Society of Spectacle. I was born in 1984. So right.
Was it 68? The Situationists.
Yeah. Right. So 68 in the revolution. Yeah. And when I was born, the Society of Spectacle was already happening. So I was born into it. So it's something that always strikes me, that this was theorized in 68 and it's still happening and it's never going to stop.
Yeah.
And I don't have a perception of the world other than this. This is all I know.
And how do you think that relates then to sort of what's going on in the world sort of more politically and things at the moment? Because I feel like we're almost ready for another revolution culturally. And I think it's difficult, right? And it's obviously just my perspective, but you know, it seems that people are becoming more and more divisive, and there's less common ground, and certainly because of the media and the way things are presented and many different reasons, we're kind of going this way and we're losing that consensus. And how do you feel like and of course, politically, I suppose people are then saying, well, there's going to be maybe potentially some kind of revolution or some kind of civil war or these kind of things politically. But how do you feel that relates to maybe society of the spectacle, the situationists, and the ongoing, ongoing way of thinking? How does that relate, or do you think we're ready for another cultural revolution?
Oh, that's a heavy term, huh? Cultural revolution, reminding me of the Chinese now.
I'm spitballing here, I guess.
No, that's cool. That's cool. The society of the spectacle. You can look at it in two ways, really, and the whole idea of image as the interface between life and life, basically, real life and real life. And mediating all our dwellings and mediating all our opinions, intellect, just the fabrication of a life through images. And we live this right now. We are living this right now in this Instagram life, basically. In terms of effects of the image, and not related to this Instagram live or a tool that we might use in this aspect. Images are playing roles in our brains, So, and we've seen this recently with Facebook and with Instagram, how they influence teenagers. And 1/3 of teenagers is likely to suffer from depression because of the image that they find, image issues that they find by being in touch with Instagram accounts that promote unsustainable ways of self love and self-care, basically. So you have this way with this way of looking at the society of the spectacle, the images, and then you have this other pathway of the situationist, which is the flaneur, and the way in which you go about the city, and the way in which you see how man-made structures have been permeated and penetrated by nature, and you really see this contrast between what is our actions on the world we live in. So one can be more observational, the other one can be more worrying, so to speak, or more ingrained in our living lives. And I think that especially people who live, pretty much everybody, only a very small amount of people live so isolated that they don't have contact with human-built structures and things like that. Yeah. So I think nowadays the way in which we lead our lives in the communities that we live, it's up to us to see how to see, basically, if that makes any sense. Yeah. So the situationists are always going to be in my mind, and in terms of the political arena at the moment, I think that the image is a very complex topic to discuss. I don't think images are going to end ever. We see, it's part of our biological constitution to see an image, and we thrive through them. Humankind thrives through images. So I don't see an end to this in terms of how images will continue to mediate our life and our experience of life and our experience of society. What I think that can change is, again, the way in which we look at these images, and the way in which, repeating the pun, see what we see. In terms of revolutions and things like that, I think it's not really gonna, I don't know, but I don't think it's gonna come from us, because I see us, the people. I think it's gonna be provoked by some geopolitical, we see Ukraine at the moment, and Russia, and how the impact of that is having in our price of petrol. Without petrol, people can't go to work. Without going to work, people start being able to pay their bills. It's a vicious circle. And when things get, I think this is a bit like how the pandemic affected our lives, and it started being a really big issue on how are we going to progress from here. People were very lost. as far as what's next. And I think it's when these things happen, when people are expecting, not necessarily orders, that's not the right term, but instructions or ways of doing things. Now you're going to your job, now you have to take the train. All of these, things that are so ingrained and programmed in us, automatic. When these things break down, it's then when there might be a revolution. So I think it's going to take a long time for the people to rise up, because as long as we are able to pay the bills, raise children, I don't think we're going to be in a revolution. I think it's going to be something coming from powerful corporations, or the lack of water. It's 2 months of extreme drought here in Portugal. It's winter and it hasn't dropped. Rain hasn't dropped at all. It's very worrying. So water wars, I think they're coming sooner rather than later, unfortunately.
Well, look, let's move on to something a little brighter as we're into our last. I want to talk about the future generations, and on about influence, and on about making changes, positive ones, we hope. Let's talk a bit about the journal that you're the principal editor of, the Journal of Arts Writing by Students, aka JAWS, the peer with the coolest acronym out there. So, Inês, tell us, what's the premise? Why is it different? Tell us the aims and scopes, and then we can talk a little bit more about any future call for papers or anything like that, and top tips you might have for people who want to submit. But tell us, what's JAWS in a nutshell, and what's the aims of the publication? Why is it different?
So we aim to publish emerging authors and emerging artists who write about their art practice or any other topic, but we kind of trying to heighten this idea of practice-based research. And at the moment, I see the discourse also kind of turning into what we were calling unconventional submissions, which were more visual, critical visual essays. I think that sort of writing is now sort of gaining a bit more, being in the spotlight much more, because creative writing was never in the realm of academia. But art practice brought the attention to writing as practice, and this has obviously a creative input. So I think what we are seeing now is courses and course leaders trying to implement strategies from creative writing, but with the critical backbone that we still need from academic writing and things like that. And so we are definitely up publishing more of that. It's all about promoting students, so masters and PhD students who maybe they didn't have enough time to concentrate on a specific topic, and after uni they can. So we welcome submissions from alumni up to 3 years of finishing their degree. Or up to 3 published articles in peer-reviewed journals as well. So it's all about the idea of propelling the artists and these emerging authors coming through arts writing. So that's more or less our mission. We want to bring about a conversation of how students can articulate, can have a space to articulate their research within the arts.
So what kind of papers are you after specifically then? If someone's out there now listening and they want to submit, they're an undergraduate, postgraduate, they're an early career scholar within 3 years of graduation. What kind of papers and things are you specifically after?
So we usually receive 4 types of submissions. But there's a few more, and I'll go through them with you now. But usually we have academic writing, then practice-based research articles, which are self-referential, and the unconventional submissions, visual essays, and then also book reviews, exhibition reviews, and opinion articles. And then we also have interviews. Interviews tend to be done by us editors, but we also welcome them. In fact, we've had a submission for the current, the issue we are currently working on the importance of interviewing, using an interview as a case study. So it's very interesting article within the scope of arts writing, because it's, again, it's self-referential, but within arts writing, within the arts writing field. Yeah.
Very interesting. Okay, and what about forthcoming issues? Do you have any particularly interesting call for papers out, or any special themed issues that are on the horizon?
So basically, we're working a little behind schedule, unfortunately, because unfortunately we're still seeing the ripples of COVID affecting our a stream of peer reviewers. Even the authors are struggling to respond. I've been in touch with other people who run journals, and unfortunately it's been across the board like this.
We're seeing it across many of our most successful journals. Everyone's a bit behind because of all the fallout from COVID.
Yeah. So this issue that we are trying to finish and are behind is nearly closed. But yes, I've got exciting news. We've never done a themed issue, and we're going to do that now. And it was, well, not a coincidence per se that we've came together with this theme, but it was a coincidence that all our editors are working within tangents of the same field that I'm working with. So Ralph, for example, he works a lot with psychogeography. Nina works with phenomenology and extractivism. So as we were trying to figure out what was the theme, we kind of decided, well, why not do something that we are experts in? So you know, it makes sense, doesn't it? So yeah. So
sorry, go on.
Sorry. Yeah. So just to say that the official theme, we boiled it down. With our brand new advisory board as well. We've boiled it down, and it's if anyone wants to submit, please submit articles that are related to art and non-human agencies. So yeah, so we want to explore what is agency within the arts, and looking at how indigenousness doesn't happen within Western societies, and how can we give a voice to species that are non-human. And this can be done through the lens of art practice, can be done through the lens of art writing. So yeah, we're going to be working on these themes.
Yeah, because animal studies and art is a big, you know, it's two big topics at the moment that we're seeing a lot of things come to us that relate to that. So, well, sort of finally then, if anyone out there is interested in finding out more about the Journal of Arts Writing by Students, anyone wants to submit, and that could be a review or any of the other types of academic writing that Inês has highlighted today, then please do go to www.intellectbooks.com and just Google the acronym JAWS, J-A-W-S, as in the shark, and you will find lots of information. You can download a free issue, and there's call for papers and about Inês, about the journal, and about all the other editors and editorial advisory boards who work on the publication. Also, do have a look at Inês' website, inesartista.com. You can find out
net.
Sorry, pardon me. Our practice and various other things that are going on. But just finally, well, first of all, thank you so much for joining us today. It's been a real pleasure. I really enjoyed that conversation. Thank you to everyone in our audience.
Likewise, James.
But thank you joining in. But do you have any final thoughts? Is there anything you want to highlight, or anything you'd like to just say as as we're leaving?
I guess that it's indeed a call for people to engage with the journal. I mean, the postgraduate community is so vast, and it's so rich of knowledge and creating knowledge, and it's just very important to get these new thinking out there, because all of these traditions that I've mentioned before, they are still present, and emerging authors and artists, universities are hubs for new knowledge, and it needs to come out. This knowledge needs to be able to be read, and JAWS is a platform for that. So yeah, it's just an appeal really for people to engage with the journal. Might it be as a peer reviewer, might it be as just participating and collaborating with some help administrative in terms, we can give experience in that, in the sense of getting to know the ins and outs of running a journal, intellects being great like that, you know, creating the space for us to be able to run the journal like that as well. So it's a great team to be involved with, really. And I'm not talking about myself, I'm talking about the team that it's engaged with JAWS. So yeah, join us.
Wonderful. Oh, well, what a lovely note to finish on. So again, thank you so much for joining me. Thanks to everyone in the audience.
Likewise,
And we'll be back again soon. Keep an eye out on the Instagram page to find out who will be joining me on next week's In Conversation. So thank you so much. Have a wonderful rest of your day. Cheers, everybody.
You too, James. Thank you so much. Okay, bye now.